Have you ever thought that a single, seemingly insignificant action could alter the entire trajectory of your life? Most people wait for the perfect moment, believing that change requires monumental effort, grand plans, or extraordinary courage. But the truth is, the universe bends not to the weight of our intentions, but to the momentum of our smallest steps. A step as simple as a decision, a shift in thought, or a quiet action can ripple outward, creating waves that transform the impossible into reality. Today, we explore how even the tiniest step can become the catalyst for profound change. Every journey, no matter how grand, begins with a single, humble step. The act of starting, however small, holds a power that cannot be measured by immediate results. Often, people wait for perfect conditions or monumental courage, not realizing that the very act of moving forward, even slightly, sets unseen forces into motion. This small step becomes the spark that lights the fire of transformation, quietly shaping the path ahead while the mind underestimates its significance. Without the courage to begin, the most extraordinary dreams remain locked within the mind, never touching reality. Small steps, though subtle, accumulate into unstoppable momentum over time. Each decision, each effort, and each action compounds, creating effects far beyond what the eye can see. What feels insignificant today can evolve into life-altering outcomes tomorrow. Movement generates energy, and energy attracts further opportunities. When one learns to honor the importance of these tiny actions, life begins to flow differently, revealing possibilities that once seemed impossible. Consistency in small efforts ultimately outweighs sporadic bursts of grand ambition, quietly rewriting the story of existence. Fear and inertia are often the greatest obstacles to change. The mind resists motion because it clings to comfort and familiarity, convincing us that standing still is safer than taking action. Yet, even the tiniest step begins to dissolve the grip of fear. Once motion starts, the mind recognizes that change is not as threatening as imagined. Courage does not lie in giant leaps or dramatic gestures, but in the willingness to move forward when the outcome is uncertain. Each small step weakens the illusion of impossibility, making the next step easier and more natural. The ripple of a small step extends far beyond the individual. Every action influences the environment, relationships, and even the trajectory of thoughts. What may seem trivial in isolation sets off a chain reaction, touching areas of life previously untouched. Opportunities that were invisible while standing still begin to appear, and the perception of what is possible expands. The smallest choices can create momentum that transforms not only personal reality, but also the energy around it, proving that nothing in life is too small to matter. Ultimately, true change begins in simplicity. The smallest step taken with awareness carries the potential to transform everything. Each movement builds courage, dissolves fear, and reshapes reality in ways that cannot be predicted. Life does not require grand gestures or perfect timing, it responds to the motion of those who act even modestly. By valuing the power of small steps, one learns to trust the process of transformation, understanding that monumental change often begins quietly with a single humble action. Small steps may seem almost invisible at first, yet they carry a power that unfolds quietly and relentlessly. Every minor action adds to the momentum of life, even when it feels like nothing is changing. The accumulation of these steps creates a force that cannot be ignored, a subtle energy that shapes outcomes far beyond what we can foresee. What starts as a single motion grows into a current strong enough to redirect the course of events, proving that persistence, no matter how small, is more potent than sudden bursts of effort. The slow build of momentum requires patience and trust. Often, people give up because they do not see immediate results. forgetting that the impact of consistent effort is invisible in the early stages. Each small decision, each quiet effort acts like a drop of water carving its way through stone over time. The world responds not to grand gestures alone, but to the steady accumulation of actions that create unshakable force. Consistency becomes the secret engine behind transformations that appear sudden but have been years in the making. Inertia is defeated not by grand leaps, but by the smallest motions forward. The mind clings to what is known, resisting even the tiniest step into uncertainty. Yet each small action weakens this resistance, breaking the chains of hesitation and doubt. Momentum begins the moment movement starts, and with every step, fear loses its grip. This process demonstrates that the path to transformation is not about perfection or speed, but about the courage to keep moving, one small step at a time. The effects of momentum extend far beyond the individual. Every small step generates ripples that touch situations, relationships, and opportunities in ways that are not immediately visible. What seems trivial can influence everything in subtle, profound ways, shifting circumstances and opening doors that were previously closed. The accumulation of small steps becomes a force that changes not only personal destiny but also the energy surrounding it, proving that no action, however minor, is ever wasted. Ultimately, the power of momentum lies in its quiet persistence. It is not the dramatic gestures that shape the world, but the steady, deliberate progression of small actions repeated over time. Each tiny step builds strength, reshapes reality, and sets the stage for outcomes that once seemed impossible. Trusting this process allows transformation to unfold naturally, showing that true change is less about sudden leaps and more about the unrelenting growth created by consistent, humble steps. The mind resists change because it clings to comfort and familiarity even when stagnation causes suffering. It convinces itself that standing still is safer than moving forward, creating invisible chains that hold life in place. Every hesitation, every delay strengthens the illusion that growth requires extraordinary effort, while in truth, freedom begins with a single small motion. Taking even the tiniest step is an act of defiance against the inertia that keeps life static, a declaration that the mind will no longer control the possibilities of existence. Once motion begins, the grip of resistance starts to weaken. The first step does not need to be perfect, grand, or fully understood, it only needs to exist. This small act signals to the mind that movement is possible and the chains of habitual stagnation begin to loosen. What once seemed impossible or intimidating suddenly becomes attainable. And the mind starts to recognize that progress does not require heroic leaps but simple, deliberate action. The smallest step carries the power to break patterns that have held the mind captive for years. Each effort, no matter how minor, creates a shift in perception. The world around begins to feel different because the mind itself has begun to release its own limitations. Resistance is not something external, it is manufactured by thoughts, fears and assumptions. By acting despite these internal barriers, the smallest step becomes a doorway to liberation. Momentum builds quietly from each successive step. What starts as a single effort gradually gains force, making the next step easier and the path ahead clearer. Inertia loses its dominance because it thrives only in stillness. Once movement exists even minimally, it grows and accelerates, proving that the mind cannot maintain its resistance in the presence of action. Small steps compound, creating energy that propels life forward, far beyond what was imaginable in the grip of hesitation. Breaking free from stagnation is not about monumental effort. It is about daring to move when the mind demands stillness. Every small action challenges the comfort of routine and the illusion of limitation. In this way, The tiniest step becomes revolutionary, disrupting the patterns that have long defined existence and opening a space for growth, clarity, and transformation that was once deemed unreachable. Action has its own power, independent of the results it produces. Often, people hesitate because they cannot see immediate outcomes, believing that effort is meaningful only when it brings instant success. Yet the truth is that the very act of moving, of doing, sets unseen forces into motion that will eventually bear fruit. Each step, however small, carries energy that reshapes circumstances, even if the impact is not visible in the moment. When the mind focuses on outcome alone, it becomes trapped in expectation, but action itself contains the seed of transformation. The significance of a step lies not in recognition or reward, but in the momentum it generates. Motion creates patterns that the mind cannot predict, opening doors that were invisible while standing still. Even when no immediate result appears, the act of doing is quietly changing the structure of reality around you. The universe responds to energy and motion, not to hesitation or doubt. When action becomes the priority, waiting for perfect conditions or guaranteed results loses its power over life. Each small effort builds the foundation for future breakthroughs. What seems insignificant in isolation can accumulate, creating shifts that are profound and lasting. The impact of a single action is often delayed, yet it never disappears. It shapes perception, builds confidence, and alters the direction of choices that follow. By committing to action rather than obsessing over outcomes, the mind learns to trust the process of life itself. Action also dissolves fear and indecision. When the first step is taken, even without certainty, it signals to the mind that motion is possible. The resistance that keeps people trapped in inaction begins to weaken. What was once daunting becomes manageable, and courage grows with each successive effort. The process demonstrates that results are not the starting point of transformation. Movement is. Ultimately, focusing on action rather than outcome transforms the way life unfolds. The smallest step, repeated and sustained, accumulates into change that far exceeds what could have been imagined at the beginning. Results follow naturally when motion is prioritized over expectation. By valuing action itself, one learns to move through fear, uncertainty and doubt, allowing life to respond to momentum rather than hesitation. Consistency is the hidden engine that drives transformation. Each small action, repeated day after day, compounds into patterns that shape the course of life without drawing attention. The mind often underestimates these quiet forces because they do not announce themselves with drama or immediacy, yet their impact is profound. Habits formed through consistent effort eventually determine outcomes more than sudden bursts of ambition or rare moments of inspiration. When motion is sustained, it becomes unstoppable, even if it begins with the smallest, seemingly insignificant steps. Every repetition strengthens the foundation of change. What is done once may feel trivial, but when repeated, it solidifies into structure, discipline, and clarity. Consistency trains the mind to trust itself and the process, creating a rhythm that aligns thought, intention, and action. Over time, the repeated effort generates confidence and resilience, making larger challenges manageable. It proves that transformation does not depend on extraordinary circumstances, but on persistent, deliberate engagement with the present moment. Consistency also reveals what was previously invisible. Repeated actions expose patterns, reveal opportunities, and clarify choices that the mind could not see before. Each step adds insight, shaping perception and understanding in ways that cannot be rushed. Through steady action, life gradually unfolds in alignment with intention, showing that the momentum created by persistence can overcome obstacles that once seemed insurmountable. The power of repeated effort is not limited to personal change, it extends to influence and impact. Small, consistent actions ripple outward, affecting relationships, circumstances, and the energy around us. What starts as a personal habit can inspire, shift, and transform environments over time. The subtle force of persistence has the ability to redefine not only one life, but also everything it touches, quietly reshaping reality through dedication and discipline. Ultimately, consistency transforms the ordinary into extraordinary. The smallest repeated actions accumulate into outcomes far greater than imagined, proving that true power lies not in rare feats but in the devotion to continue. It is the unwavering commitment to movement, repetition, and focus that quietly crafts mastery, reshapes destiny, and turns small, deliberate steps into monumental transformation. Action has a way of altering perception that is subtle yet undeniable. When the first step is taken, even a small one, it shifts the way the mind observes the world. Situations that seemed fixed or opportunities that appeared out of reach suddenly become visible. This clarity does not come from thinking or planning, but from doing. Movement itself changes the lens through which reality is perceived, revealing paths and possibilities that remain hidden to those who remain motionless. The act of stepping forward generates awareness. By engaging with life, rather than waiting for perfect conditions, the mind begins to see patterns, connections, and potential where before there was only confusion or doubt. The simplest action opens the door to insight, and insight reinforces further action. This creates a cycle in which perception and action feed one another, amplifying the power of even the smallest motions. Perception changes not only how the world is seen, but also how the self is experienced. Taking action reshapes confidence, dissolves fear, and redefines what is considered possible. The mind recognizes its own capacity to influence outcomes, and this awareness inspires further motion. Each step, however minor, acts as a lens, sharpening understanding and aligning thought with reality. The clarity that emerges from action often reveals opportunities that were previously invisible. Situations that seemed chaotic or stagnant start to show patterns, and solutions become apparent where once there were obstacles. This transformation in perception is not theoretical, it is practical, guiding subsequent choices and decisions with a precision that stillness cannot provide. Ultimately, perception and action are inseparable. Movement creates understanding, and understanding fuels further movement. Even the smallest step can open doors that no amount of planning, reflection, or hesitation could ever reveal. By acting, the mind begins to perceive the hidden currents of life, turning once invisible possibilities into tangible realities. Fear is never as powerful as it appears, its strength exists only in the absence of action. The moment a step is taken, no matter how small, the mind begins to realize that what was imagined as impossible is simply a perception. Motion itself destabilizes fear because fear thrives in stillness and in hesitation. By acting, the mind confronts its own illusions, showing that the barriers it has built are not insurmountable, but fragile and easily shifted. Every movement, even a subtle one, chips away at the weight of fear. The first step does not need to be perfect or complete, it only needs to exist. That initial motion breaks the pattern of avoidance and creates a rhythm of courage. With each subsequent action, fear loses its dominance, shrinking in proportion to the growing strength of momentum. The mind learns that movement is a more powerful force than hesitation, and fear begins to recede naturally. Fear is often tied to uncertainty, but motion creates certainty through experience. Each step, each effort provides evidence that the imagined dangers are not absolute. The process of doing replaces speculation with reality, dissolving the exaggerated threats that fear projects. What seemed impossible begins to feel achievable, and the mind starts to trust its own capacity to navigate challenges. As action continues, fear is transformed from an obstacle into a teacher. The process of stepping forward repeatedly exposes the mind to its own limitations and reveals that most of them are imagined. Courage is cultivated through engagement, not contemplation. The very act of moving forward reshapes perception, showing that fear exists only when motion stops and the mind ruminates over what might happen instead of what can be done. Ultimately, motion and fear cannot coexist at full strength. Every small action diminishes the illusions that fear relies upon, proving that courage is not an innate quality but a response to movement. By embracing even the smallest step, the grip of fear is loosened, revealing possibilities that were invisible while standing still and demonstrating that transformation begins the moment one chooses to act. Every action carries consequences that extend far beyond the moment it occurs. A single decision, even the smallest, creates waves that touch situations, people and circumstances in ways that cannot be fully predicted. What appears insignificant at first can alter dynamics, influence relationships, and open doors that seemed closed. The impact of one small choice does not remain isolated, it moves outward, shaping the environment and the possibilities that follow. The ripple effect grows with every subsequent action. One small step influences the next, creating momentum that spreads through multiple layers of life. Choices made in thought, word, or deed begin to intersect with other forces, producing results that could never have been anticipated in isolation. This interconnectedness shows that life is not a series of separate events, but a web of influence where even the tiniest motion matters. The influence of one small choice is not limited to external circumstances, it also transforms the mind. Each action shapes perception, confidence, and decision-making, reinforcing the capacity to act again. By observing the outcomes of one decision, the mind learns to trust itself, to recognize patterns, and to anticipate the subtle effects of further actions. This internal shift is as powerful as the external changes it produces. Ripple effects are often invisible at first, but they compound over time. What seems trivial in the present can grow into major turning points in the future. The quiet influence of consistent, deliberate choices accumulates, reshaping opportunities, relationships, and the overall trajectory of life. Each small action is therefore a seed planted in unseen soil, eventually bearing results far beyond the initial effort. Understanding the ripple effect reveals the profound responsibility embedded in every choice. No action is too minor to matter, and no decision exists in isolation. By acting consciously and deliberately, one sets in motion waves that transform both inner and outer worlds, proving that even the smallest step has the power to change everything. What appears insignificant in the moment often carries a hidden weight that only becomes visible with time. The mind has a tendency to dismiss small actions, labeling them as inconsequential or too minor to matter. Yet every effort, no matter how slight, sets into motion forces that accumulate and compound silently. What feels trivial now may be the very seed from which monumental change grows, even if its importance is not immediately recognized. The illusion of insignificance is reinforced by impatience. People expect instant results and judge actions solely by their immediate effect, ignoring the slow, unseen process of transformation that is quietly unfolding. The smallest efforts are rarely dramatic, yet they are precise in their ability to shift trajectories. Over time, these seemingly minor contributions build into structures, habits, and outcomes that would have been impossible to achieve in a single, grand gesture. Every small effort carries with it potential that cannot be measured at the moment. A word spoken, a decision made, or a task completed may appear inconsequential, but it influences circumstances in ways that ripple through time. What seems unimportant today may alter perceptions, open opportunities, or inspire action in ways that are entirely unforeseen. The true measure of an action lies not in its immediate visibility, but in its eventual influence. Trusting the unseen impact of small efforts requires patience and awareness. It demands faith that life responds to motion, even when the results are not yet clear. By honoring small contributions, one cultivates a pattern of engagement and persistence that compounds over time. The quiet accumulation of these efforts becomes the foundation for breakthroughs, moments, and outcomes that might have seemed unreachable at the outset. The perception of insignificance is therefore a trap created by the mind. In reality, nothing is too small to matter. Each step, each effort, and each act of intentional motion contributes to the unfolding of change. By recognizing the hidden power in minor actions, one learns that monumental transformation often begins quietly, invisibly, and without fanfare, proving that the smallest steps are never truly insignificant. True courage is revealed in the act of beginning, not in the grandeur of achievement. It is not the leaps that define bravery, but the willingness to move forward when certainty does not exist. The first step, taken despite doubt and hesitation, carries more power than years of preparation or endless contemplation. Courage is cultivated in motion, and it is the act of starting that transforms fear into possibility. Beginning requires surrender to uncertainty. The mind resists the unknown, convincing itself that waiting will make the step easier or the path clearer. Yet waiting only strengthens hesitation and deepens fear. The moment action is chosen, even in the smallest measure, the illusion of impossibility begins to dissolve. By stepping forward, one demonstrates that movement itself is a form of mastery stronger than analysis or planning. Each initial action has a multiplying effect. The first step becomes the foundation upon which subsequent motion is built. Momentum emerges from beginning, and the courage to continue grows with each forward effort. What seems like a modest act at the outset often determines the trajectory of growth, shaping outcomes far beyond the original step. Courage and motion feed each other, creating a cycle that transforms hesitation into strength. The willingness to begin also reshapes perception. Fear, uncertainty, and self-doubt exist only as long as action is delayed. Once the first step is taken, the mind recognizes that the unknown is navigable and the capacity exists within. Each act of the beginning expands confidence and shifts what is considered possible. Bravery is revealed not in the absence of fear, but in the decision to act despite it. Ultimately, the courage to begin is the catalyst for all transformation. Without the first step, potential remains dormant and the path ahead is never revealed. True bravery is measured by the readiness to start when nothing is guaranteed, by the choice to move when the mind resists, and by the understanding that every journey, no matter how monumental, begins with a single, deliberate motion.